Hey, everybody. Jonathan Bailor back. Delightful show for you today. We have a wonderful woman who is just doing so much to help so many with a so common condition today, and that is diabetes. We have the editor and primary writer at the very highly trafficked diabetes website, diabetesdaily.com. She's also the proprietor of livinginprogress.com. And she's just an awesome lady. And her name is Ginger Vieira. Ginger, welcome to the show.
Hi, Jonathan. Thanks for having me.
My pleasure. Well, Ginger, let's start. I mean, you've got so many hot topics that you deal with. You deal with emotional eating. You deal with diabetes. You deal with emotional eating when you have diabetes. You put them together. but before we get into all that, how did you get started on this path to helping people to eat smarter and live better?
Oh, man, it was totally an accident, actually. When I was a junior in college, I have type 1 diabetes, not to be confused with type 2 diabetes. And I also have celiac disease. And I had definitely kind of let things slip during my junior year of college. I was drinking maybe not really like a classic college student, but enough when you add that to diabetes that it was showing in my blood sugars and just showing in my energy and my health. And I just felt lousy by the end of that year. Mm-hmm. And so I spent that summer kind of self-studying weightlifting. And I'd always loved Arnold Schwarzenegger. And I watched a lot of action movies with my brothers as a kid. So I always had a thing for meatheads and muscle. And I had always loved doing push-ups to keep up with my brothers. So when I started looking into weightlifting, I was like, oh my gosh, I really, really love this. And by the end of that summer, I realized I wanted to learn more. And so I hired a trainer during my senior year of college. And I also started studying Ashtanga yoga, which is power yoga, basically, in America. And 6 months later, while I was finishing college for writing, I was getting certified as a personal trainer and an Ashtanga yoga instructor. And then I spent that next several years after college writing and working as a personal trainer. And that's kind of where it all started, getting into a whole world I never anticipated before that.
Well, and what kept you going? Because, I mean, a lot of people have dabbled in this area, but you've really made a life out of it. So what kept you motivated and really made you, take off that runway and make a life out of this?
Well, it was actually a really frustrating thing. A non-frustrating thing was that I kept getting stronger and stronger. And somebody said, hey, you should get into powerlifting, because I was significantly stronger in a shorter period of time. And I was really good at moving a lot of weight just a few times. And when I told my doctor that my new endocrinologist, as an adult with diabetes, I transitioned to an adult endocrinologist. And I said, oh, I'm thinking about going to weightlifting and powerlifting, and I've gotten really strong. He just rolled his eyes at me and was so rude and didn't take it seriously at all. And so I never went back to that guy. And I started studying more exercise physiology so that I could understand how to manage my blood sugars as closely as possible while training in something so intense. And 6 months later, I set about 7 records at my first competition. And I had learned things about the body that impact type 1 diabetes so much that no doctor had ever taken the time to teach me, or maybe even didn't know was useful information for a type 1 diabetic. So that just propelled everything further. And I realized that there's a lot of information out there that is so easy to explain if you take the time to understand how it really applies to life with diabetes.
Ginger, I love it. We've got the conflation, maybe be the wrong word, of so many just awesome, interesting topics here. So we got living with type 1 diabetes. We've got a female who has embraced and completely dominated weightlifting, which just makes me want to stand up on my chair and say, awesome. And then we've got, so let's deconstruct a little bit of this. First, Sure. Tell us about your record-setting weightlifting achievements.
Well, I went into weightlifting because I wanted to look better, right? It was totally a vanity thing, and I wanted to feel better about my body. But I remember the first few, 3 to 4 months, I remember thinking, I don't really feel like I look different, and the scale doesn't really look different, but I really love doing this. So I kept buying more training sessions, and my trainer was awesome, and he didn't know a ton about diabetes, but he knew enough that he was really willing to help learn with me. And so that was really important to me. And I felt really inspired by that. And I just stuck with it, even though that first 3 to 4 months, I didn't get the visual benefits I really was wanting. And the next 6 months, the next 2 years was what turned into phenomenal powerlifting things that I never anticipated. I set those first 7 records, and then I won the Vermont State bench press that summer. I then set a few records in another competition that fall, and then I won the next Vermont State bench press contest, and I qualified for a Raw Unity powerlifting competition meet.
Ginger, can you give me some numbers? I want some numbers. I want to know
sure.
What were your lift, your personal bests?
Okay, my very best bench press was 190 pounds, and I was in the 148 weight class, and I'm 5'1.5".
I love it.
And I mean, I was meaty. I'm not powerlifting now, so I'm not nearly as meaty. But I wasn't super lean, but I was, I had lots of muscle on there. Really, it was not hard for me to build muscle, and I focused every part of my energy. I stopped drinking because somebody explained that alcohol stops your, it does, maybe not stops, but it interferes with your recovery and your muscles recovering and getting stronger.
Absolutely.
And I focused, everything around getting enough protein and getting enough sleep and getting my cardio. It was like all I thought about. And I had a great group of friends that's all they thought about too, but more on the bodybuilding side. My best squat was 265. That was always really my weakest squat. I didn't really figure out the technique in my own body until kind of later when I was getting to a point where I actually had to stop powerlifting. So I feel like if I had learned that sooner, I could have gotten my squat stronger. And my best deadlift was 315. And that was deadlift and bench were my favorites, especially the deadlift, I guess.
Well, and how much were you weighing when you did a 315 deadlift?
I was always in the 148 weight class.
Woo, folks, soak that in for a second. You have a 5'1" female, 140 pounds, deadlifting, which for folks who aren't familiar, that basically just means pick something off the ground. Over 300 pounds. I love that. I love it. Strength is beautiful. I love that. That makes me happy.
That is one of the coolest. I love training other women who weren't interested in powerlifting, but who just wanted to learn weightlifting and get in shape. I love teaching them how to deadlift, because once you get over that fear of the barbell and the heavier weight, it's just so empowering. The movement itself is so cool.
Ginger, I got a funny story for you involving deadlift. So I don't know what it is about my physiology, but doing a straight bar deadlift just does not work for me. I continuously hurt my back, but trap bar deadlifts, like the hex bar, where you grip it on the sides, for individuals not familiar, for people who aren't as geeky as Ginger and myself, aka 99.9% of the population, imagine lifting up a wheelbarrow handles, like they're on the side of you and you lift them up. It's similar to that. And I was like, I can do this. This works. And I'm actually pretty good at it. But the gym I go to didn't have one of these things. So I went on the internet and I bought one, and I would carry my 65-pound trap bar into the gym. And these people were like, eventually they said, you got to stop bringing your own equipment in for legal purposes. But they were like, man, you are dedicated. You're carrying that, put it in the trunk of my car. It weighed my car down. It was so funny.
Nice. That's not easy to carry. That thing's awkward.
No, it's super awkward. Well, Ginger, and tell me a bit about what was your experience? Living with type 1 diabetes and weightlifting, what were the unique challenges that put upon you?
Yeah, what a lot of people don't understand about type 1 diabetes is it's so different than type 2 diabetes, which is what you see in the media and the news. Type 1 diabetes, I don't make any insulin. My body does not make insulin because it destroyed the aspect of my pancreas that is responsible for that very important duty. And we all need insulin to live, right? And we need it for energy. And if your blood sugar is constantly high, you get a lot of problems. If you're low, you end up having a seizure pretty quickly. So exercise obviously utilizes a lot of energy, and some types of exercise make your blood sugar drop and other types make it rise. And so learning exactly how much I need to adjust my insulin dose and how much I need to adjust the insulin dose for any food I eat before I work out, and then the food I eat after I work out, And then competition day is a whole different issue because you have adrenaline and you're excited. And even though I wasn't like noticeably nervous, from the moment I woke up at my first competition, on the day of my first competition, my blood sugar was through the roof because of all the adrenaline. And it took me 2 or 3 competitions to figure out exactly what I had to do with my insulin to prevent that from happening, because you don't want to be competing at a 300 blood sugar when all these non-diabetics are at 104 and they're at their prime, and I've got to add a 300 blood sugar on top of also competing like they are, and so you don't want to be at a disadvantage.
Ginger, I love that you called out just how different type 1 diabetes is from type 2 diabetes, because they are really different. And I think an understanding of type 1 diabetes, at least for me when I was doing all of my research, it really provides an amazing example of just how smart the body can be. And then when the body loses its ability to do things, how much of a pain in the butt that can be. And what I mean, I'm sure you can empathize with this, is, for most people, the body automatically regulates blood sugar. Like that is type 1 diabetes is a terrible disease. It's a pain in the butt. It's potentially fatal if you don't have access to insulin. And I salute you for living with it, because it's not easy. But normally the body is going to, when we eat properly, automatically regulate our blood sugar within a range. And it's only if we are faced with the condition, which is type 1 diabetes, that we have to take over that otherwise unconscious function in our body by manually regulating, for lack of better terms, our blood sugar with insulin. And that's got to be just such a pain. I mean, that's got to be, you do that all day, every day. It's always on your mind. I mean, how's that work?
Well said. Do you have diabetes? How do you know this? Usually it takes a parent of a kid with diabetes or someone who has it to be able to articulate what you just said. I often wonder, like, I feel like I could have invented an amazing rocket ship with all of the energy that I have spent thinking about my blood sugar if I didn't have diabetes, because it's endless. And the problem is that even though there is a lot of science to it, there's a lot of things that happen in your body that your body takes care of, right? With glycogen and insulin and hormones and all this stuff that I don't know is happening in my body all the time. And I can't always respond until it's already happened. Like the adrenaline response, you don't have to deal with that. You just get the benefit of the adrenaline pumping up. And so I have to, oh, geez, I've got adrenaline happening in this situation. I didn't even know it. I just woke up and I'm eating breakfast, And so it's a constant, like you said, you're constantly thinking about it. And even though there is a lot of medication and there's insulin pumps and there's this and that, it's still not perfect. And you still have to work at it all day long.
Ginger, the reason you mentioned, like, Jonathan, do you have type 1 diabetes, or do you have like a child or family? I don't. But the thing that when I learned about type 1 diabetes and I learned about the homeostatic regulation of mission critical functions in our body, which in my work I talk to as the set point, but has much more technical terms in the actual medical literature, is this idea of counting calories and the idea that we need to manually regulate calories in, calories out. One of the reasons this gets me so amped up is it's basically like taking people, it's like making everyone a type 1 diabetic. It's like saying you need to consciously regulate 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year, how your body regulates energy balance. And that is absurd. Like that, that is not only, and it stinks. Like, why would we, from Ginger, you can say from experience, like having to manually control otherwise automatic functions in your body is not fun. Would you agree with that?
Yeah. And it's not even really possible.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I think type 1 diabetes is just such an amazing example of the body, like blood sugar, perfect example, is designed to be homeostatically regulated, meaning the body has all of this wisdom that works to keep it in a range. And that doesn't mean our blood sugar can't get out of whack. Certainly type 2 diabetes shows us that if we eat the wrong quality of food, we can break that system down. And if we're born with type 1 diabetes, that system just doesn't even exist.
Right.
So why we see that, like we see that with blood sugar, we understand that with blood sugar, and we would never tell anyone who doesn't have type 1 diabetes that they need to manually inject themselves with insulin. So why are we preaching this calorie counting nonsense instead of just saying don't eat the foods that cause your body to break down in the first place. Like, let's not make everyone have to carry the burden that you so nobly carry.
And something, as a diabetic, something I encounter all the time is dietitians in the diabetes world that continue to emphasize calorie counting and refuse to acknowledge the importance of a whole lot of other things around nutrition that really are far more significant when it comes to your health.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. And I mean, I know that you're already plenty aggravated about that, but it's like good to talk to somebody who understands that, because you see it so often in diabetes dietitians and all that.
Well, and Ginger, so we're talking here about diabetes, and certainly another myth that type 1 diabetes just so obviously debunks that I can't even believe the myth still exists, because there are quite a few people in the world who carry around the burden of being type 1 diabetic, and that's the myth that calorie is a calorie. Ginger, as a type 1 diabetic, do all calories make your body react the same way?
No. Period.
So how does that myth even exist, right? Like anyone who has a basic understanding of biology knows that if you give a type 1 diabetic certain kinds of calories and do not provide them with insulin, they could die. And if you give them other kinds of calories, and it's just how does this myth continue?
Yeah, it's crazy. I mean, all you have to do is actually have diabetes for a day and eat low carb and see how much easier it is to balance your blood sugar. Mm-hmm. I mean, it only takes a day. And that's what I always want to say to the dietitians who I know don't have diabetes and keep not wanting to acknowledge the low carb phenomenon, and because it maybe conflicts with a book they wrote or something. But it's like, if they had it for a day, they would see it and they'd see the evidence. I know a friend of mine has type 1 and he's really into CrossFit and he's really into paleo. And this kid has an A1C level that's lower than most people who don't even have diabetes. A1C is basically the average blood sugar over the course of 3 months. And because he is so hardcore about his super low carb lifestyle, his A1C is phenomenal. And that would never happen if he was eating super high carb. It wouldn't even be possible because there's just too many variables with all the carbohydrates and the insulin dosing that just wouldn't happen.
Ginger, and one thing that I love what you talked about here about how when we eliminate these insane starches and sweets and we replace them with these nutrient-dense, hormonally healthy, whole, natural foods is oftentimes, this might sound like a silly example, but when something's right, it's like a bunch of things fit and it almost seems easy. Like, for example, I think we've maybe all had the experience of a bad relationship versus a good relationship. It's like when you're in a good relationship, it's just like stuff just works. Like and it's a bunch of things just work. Like things just happen to all come together somehow. And that's because it's right. Whereas like when you're in the wrong kind of a relationship, it's like nothing really, everything's a struggle. And it's like when you eliminate these starches and sweets and you replace them with more nutrient dense foods, it's just like so many things just start working and it just takes care of itself. But it's like this.
That's a perfect analogy. That's perfect.
So you got to get in that healthy relationship with food.
Yeah, that is hilarious. And I mean, I have a sweet tooth. Absolutely. I've had a sweet tooth my whole life. It has nothing to do with my diabetes. It didn't cause my diabetes. None of that constant kind of myth that people with type 1 diabetes often face. But it's about learning how to make like 80 to 95% of what you eat in the whole day really, really, really good options. And I don't feel deprived because I make a little room for the not perfect options. And for me, that's what works right now in my life. There's been other times where I didn't need any sweets, blah, blah, blah. And, I really believe in creating some flexibility for people based on where they are and what they can handle. Mm-hmm. But the main focus is, minimum 80% of what you're eating in a day to be really good, real food, and then gradually increase it as you learn more about what you're eating.
Ginger, as a fellow sweet tooth person, I have a total sweet tooth. What do you do to quench or to satisfy your sweet tooth?
Well, the biggest thing for me is to just not like fake sugars, for example. I got rid of all that stuff a couple of years ago because I just realized that was making my sweet tooth stronger. And there's all the other science behind it that people love to debate and argue about. And I don't even want to get into that. I just know that I feel better when it's not in my body. Right.
Yep.
So, but the other thing is that if I fill myself with enough of the good stuff, I don't crave the sugar nearly as much. And water too. Water is huge. If I'm not well hydrated, then I don't eat as well. And so if I keep my water bottle with me everywhere I go, I make brilliant choices around food. It's that simple.
I love it. I love it. And in fact, the point you made, Ginger, about just giving yourself sugar substitutes it's certainly better. Like my father works in addictions counseling, as is my sister, and talks about, if someone's on heroin and you can get them to start smoking cigarettes instead of taking heroin, like that is a win. Like cigarettes are less bad for you, but certainly that's not, it's still not good. It doesn't mean we should all go smoke cigarettes. The point though is what I've noticed, and tell me what you think about this, just in your own personal experience and also in your social circle and your professional circle, is so for the longest time for me, when I went sane, I totally was doing all kinds of sugar substitutes. So I went first with the artificial sweeteners, like the Splendas and the aspartames and all those kind of things. And then I moved more towards the more sugar alcohol, natural type xylitol, erythritol, which I still think for individuals who want to enjoy those kinds of things, those are not, you can't even compare those to the neural toxins that are aspartame. Right. So you got those. And then you even like further on the sanity spectrum are things like stevia, which is an herb, like it's like cinnamon. It's just a thing which happens to have a sweet taste. But Ginger, what I've noticed, all of that being said, is a couple things. One, as you start to remove sweets from your life, the amount of sweet you need to address that craving is so low. It's just so dramatic. Like a carrot might be sweet to you now, whereas before it wasn't. And the other thing I've noticed, Ginger, I'm curious your thought, is like when I've got that craving, I've noticed for me, it's actually like I always crave chocolate. Like I love chocolate. And if I eat cocoa, like raw, undutched cocoa, sweetened enough so it doesn't taste terrible, because cocoa by itself is bitter.
Yeah.
And you got to mix it with something, like mixing it with the nut butter or mixing it with a low sugar dairy. It's getting that cocoa, that healthy fiber-rich fat. That is like, woo, that gives me what the sweets used to give me, but without any of the sweets. I don't know. Is there anything you've experienced like that?
Honestly, I still really I have a stash of candy in my house at all times, like real old fashioned now and later, like genuine candy, right? Like genuine crap that's high fructose corn syrup.
Genuine crap. I love it.
But there's always, it's always in my house that I go weeks forgetting about it. It's not a big deal to me because I haven't created rules around it. I don't blame myself for having some of it. I never overeat it because it's always there. And so I can have 1 or 2 pieces of that and I'm set. That's my sweet tooth is done. And I had like 8 grams of sugar, So for me, that's what works really well. And I have, I love really good quality, 80%, dark chocolate, really good quality. What I don't like are the fake desserts where you're trying to substitute. Like I really hate the Weight Watchers type bars and the, the stuff that isn't real, that you're never going to actually feel satisfied from, and you're still trying to diet when you're eating it. And then you end up eating like the whole box or something. I see that a lot with people, is they'll eat 4 of them, whereas if they just had some really good quality ice cream, they wouldn't have needed so much of the ice cream.
Totally. I love that you brought up our different approaches here, Ginger, because I think this is one of those examples where people say, well, should I do this or should I do this? And it's actually, well, they both work for different people in the sense that you're one of the, it sounds like, types of individuals who can eat 1 or 2 genuine crap and feel good about that, and you'll feel totally satisfied. For me, like, the worst thing for me to do is to eat 1 of something I shouldn't eat, because that doesn't make me feel better. That makes me feel worse. Like now I'm like, so if there was just, it's like a tease. I'm like, oh, well now, like if you give me 1, I'm like, I want 10. So like, there's neither approach is better. It's sort of like, if you're one of those people who just give me a little bit of what I actually want, I feel good. Ginger's approach is brilliant. And if you're one of those kind of people that's more of a volume eater, meaning if you're going to eat something, you want to eat it for real, eat it, then you can make some sane substitutions, and both approaches help you to not die and not feel terrible. So that's good.
Right. Yeah. And what doesn't work for anybody is trying to be 100% perfect and say, I'm never going to eat whatever it is. Maybe it's French fries for someone instead of sugar. I could go the rest of my life without eating French fries. I could not care less about them. But I know I couldn't go the rest of my life without some kind of candy every now and then. No way. And I don't feel like I need to, it's like, it's not hurting my life. I take insulin for it, yada, yada, yada. Yeah,
absolutely. Well, we've all got to decide, it's a conscious decision for you. And I think that my mother is a very, very smart woman. And she used to always say, and again, this is 80% true. Maybe not. The spirit of it is true. She would say to me, she would joke, we'd go out. I mean, she's a funny lady too, right? We'd go out and it would be her birthday and she'd be eating, and she's like, well, my birthday, nothing has any calories. And not that calories are the thing here, but that was a little bit more funny. But another thing she'd say that definitely was more true, because certainly just because it's your birthday doesn't mean things don't have calories in them, was if you're going to eat something, make sure it's worth it.
Yeah.
And that's the key thing, is so often we see, I gotta get a little sentimental here, Ginger, because I saw something this weekend that really, I'd seen it, but it never really registered in my brain. And I was at Costco with my wife, making our weekly Costco run. And I saw this family who had this young child in their shopping cart, and the child was just chilling, like wasn't screaming, was just hanging out. And on 3 separate occasions, there was a sample of just insane garbage, like Go-Gurt, juice. And the kid wasn't reaching for it. The kid wasn't saying they wanted it, but the parent was almost like forcing it upon the child. And I was just thinking to myself, like, that poor kid is just getting set up for a life of these, because you get conditioned, you try these things in your youth and you develop these tastes. I mean, I just wonder what it would be like in a world where, I mean, you talk about you crave these certain substances. Like, if you never knew what those things were,
right,
would you still crave them?
That's a good question. There was definitely always candy in my house growing up, and none of my family was overweight. Nobody had a problem with the candy, probably because it was always there, but maybe that's why I've got to, who knows? The other part of that too, is you talked about choosing what's worth it. When I'm coaching people with diabetes, I really love emphasizing that you don't have to eliminate all carbs, right? It's because people get a lot of pressure to eat the perfect diabetic diet, but pick the carbs that are worth it. And for me, I would rather eat really low carb dinner, lunch, and breakfast and save my carb count for the day for something sweet at the end of the night. Like, I don't need bread. I don't need bagels. I would much rather make my carbs count by something sweet that I make. I make a lot of gluten-free baked goods that are better quality than a Now and Later. And, that's another option. But it's all about choosing something that's worth it versus mindlessly just eating stuff because you're not thinking twice about it.
I love that, Ginger. That is just rings of so much truth. And in fact, I think it's a great point to end on, because being conscious and choosing that which we put in our body, there's little else that is going to have a bigger impact on our day-to-day and our long-term life, right?
Yeah.
Well, Ginger, there's so much you're doing out there on the internet. You're over here with Diabetes Daily, just providing constant new information for the tens of millions of individuals who live with diabetes. And you've got your website, livinginprogress.com. You've got your books. What's next for you?
I am working on a third book right now on diabetes burnout. It should be out in maybe February 2014, February or March.
Oh, I love it. Well, we'll both have new books coming out right around the same time, so we might have to have a release party together.
Awesome. Congrats.
Well, Ginger, thank you so much for joining us today, for sharing your insights, and for being an awesome example. I mean, type 1 diabetic who's deadlifting more than twice her body weight and is smiling and empowering people all along the way. Heck, I wish we had more Gingers in the world.
Thanks for having me, Jonathan.
Oh, my pleasure. Well, folks, I hope you enjoyed today's show as much as I did. And please remember, this week and every week afterwards, eat smarter, exercise smarter, and live better. Talk with you soon.